The first scent of summer wasn't flowers or fresh-cut grass. It was smoke. Not the threatening kind, but the rich, mouth-watering kind that meant ribs were on the grill, and my father was in his element. Warren Maddox, my dad, wasn't your average backyard pitmaster. He was the city's Fire Marshal, a title he carried with quiet pride and unwavering precision. After 27 years of fighting flames, training departments, and writing safety codes, he knew fire better than most men knew their own children. He was the kind of guy who cleaned his grill grates with surgical focus and positioned his fire extinguisher exactly 3 feet to the left, because that was regulation. It was our 3rd month in Glen Estates, a gated suburb that advertised luxury living with community values. The lawns were symmetrical, the shutters were regulation-approved colors, and the neighbors smiled too hard for it to be sincere. It was step forward with Wi-Fi. But none of that bothered my dad, until he met her. Patricia Kendall appeared at the edge of our lawn like a storm cloud in pearls. She wore a khaki pantsuit like armor and gripped a clipboard as if it were a sword. "I'm Patricia, president of the HOA," she said, smiling with only her lips. "I noticed you were preparing to grill." Dad wiped his hands on a towel. "Sure am. Baby backs tonight. You're welcome to come by." Her smile didn't shift. Unfortunately, the HOA prohibits open-flame cooking appliances on weekends. It's in the community guidelines. Dad blinked. "That can't be right." "It is. Section 8.3. For the safety and harmony of the neighborhood." Dad's tone remained even. "Ma'am, I'm the city's fire marshal. This grill is certified, cleared, and placed well within code." Patricia stiffened. "This isn't about the city. It's about community expectations." She turned and walked away before he could respond, her clipboard tucked under one arm like a verdict. Later that evening, we found a printed notice taped to our front door. First violation, unauthorized use of fire-based cooking appliance. Fine, $100. The font was bold. The word unauthorized was underlined. I watched Dad read the notice with the same expression he used when assessing a faulty smoke detector, calm, methodical, but with the faintest glimmer of disbelief. "Well," he muttered, "guess we're not in Kansas anymore." The next weekend, the grill returned. Not as defiance, but as ritual. He placed it precisely where it had always been, 15 feet from the house, with a fireproof mat beneath and a thermometer clipped to the hood. He grilled with the same reverence he gave to field inspections, using long-handled tools, checking temperatures, staying vigilant. That's when Patricia returned, this time with reinforcements. She stood at the end of our driveway with 2 other board members in tow, a man who looked like a retired dentist and a woman clutching a Yorkie in a rhinestone vest. Together, they watched like sentries. Patricia snapped a photo of the grill from 3 different angles. Dad approached calmly. "Would you like a plate? The brisket's just about ready." "You've been warned," she said. "This is your 2nd violation. We'll be escalating the matter." "What, exactly, is the danger here?" he asked. "It's not just about safety," she replied. "It's about preserving order. One person bends the rules, everyone thinks they can." Dad looked her in the eye, measured her. "You know I write the city's fire safety policies, right? Then you should know better." That night, the fine doubled. $200, plus a written warning that further noncompliance could result in board action, including, incredibly, a lien on our home. That's when something shifted in Dad. Not outrage, not fear, just a slow, steely realization that this wasn't about rules. It was about power, and Patricia Kendall had just declared war. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply returned to the grill, flipped a steak with military precision, and muttered under his breath, "She has no idea who she's dealing with." I watched the smoke curl into the sky, smooth and confident, like a signal. The fire had just started. The morning after the 2nd violation notice, my dad called the city. Not to report Patricia. To clarify the legality of what she was doing. He spoke directly with legal affairs at the Department of Public Safety. After all, he knew the regulations inside and out. He'd helped write many of them. But even he wanted it on record. There were no municipal restrictions against grilling on private property in our city, provided all safety measures were followed. What the HOA had was a preference, not a law, and preferences couldn't override state code. Dad wrote all that down, documented every call, saved every email. I'm not looking for a fight, he told me, but I won't be pushed around either. Patricia, on the other hand, seemed eager to escalate. 3 days later, she appeared at our front door with a printed packet. "This is a final warning," she said, as though reading from a script. "If you continue to defy HOA policy, we will begin legal proceedings. Your actions are being documented." The board has voted unanimously. Dad took the packet and flipped through it slowly. "You're filing legal action for grilling? You're endangering the neighborhood. By cooking food in a fire code compliant setup in my own backyard with a permit issued by the very office I run?" She flinched. "Your position doesn't exempt you from the rules." "No," he agreed, "but it does mean I understand which ones are enforceable." Patricia's jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed like shutters in a storm. "We'll see what the courts say." She turned, heels snapping like gunfire on the pavement, and walked off. Dad didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he turned to me and smiled, not amused, not angry. "Just ready. She's not just enforcing a rule," he said. "She's trying to win a war." That weekend, Dad hosted what he called a fire safety cookout. It was genius. He invited neighbors, firefighters, even a city council member, and gave a live demonstration on outdoor grilling safety. He went over everything: propane storage, grease trap maintenance, fire extinguisher positioning, and proper ventilation. And he grilled the best damn ribs in town while doing it. Neighbors who'd previously waved from behind hedges now came closer. They laughed, asked questions, shared plates of food. Even the most skeptical seemed impressed. Some even admitted they'd gotten citations from Patricia too, for potted plants, wind chimes, a child's sidewalk chalk drawing. "She fined me for hanging my kid's soccer jersey on the porch," one dad said, shaking his head. "Said it violated visual harmony." Dad didn't reply. He just handed him a plate of brisket and said, "Visual harmony sounds like it needs more seasoning." But Patricia wasn't done. That night, we were watching TV when red and blue lights flashed across the living room wall. 2 police cruisers rolled up quietly and parked outside our driveway. We stepped onto the porch as the officers approached. Their postures weren't aggressive, just confused. "Got a call about a possible fire hazard," one said. "Reports of uncontrolled flames." Dad stepped down, calm and collected, and pulled out his badge. "Chief Warren Maddox. Fire Marshal. This grill's cold. Hasn't been used in 4 hours. You're welcome to inspect the area." The officers exchanged a glance. One gave a slight nod. "No need, sir. Sorry to bother you." False alarm. From across the street, Patricia stood behind her curtains watching. She'd called the cops. My fists clenched. "She's using the system against us. Can't we do something?" Dad didn't answer right away. He stared at the spot where the police had parked, thoughtful. "She doesn't understand fire," he said finally. "She thinks it's about control. But fire's about balance. You fight it with knowledge, not panic." I wasn't sure what he meant then, but I understood the look in his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was preparing. By the following week, Dad had compiled a binder, thick, organized, airtight. He labeled it HOA misconduct, preliminary evidence. He didn't plan to swing it like a hammer. He planned to build with it, slowly, precisely, the way he'd built trust in his department. And Patricia? She was just adding kindling to her own downfall. By week 5, Patricia wasn't just annoyed, she was unraveling. The police visit hadn't scared Dad off, and the HOA fines kept bouncing back, unpaid and politely contested. He never raised his voice, never made threats. He simply documented everything, every notice, every accusation, every overreach, and filed it away. What Patricia didn't realize was that Dad had been preparing cases like this for most of his career. Only back then, they were arson reports and negligence suits. This was just bureaucracy with pearls on. But Patricia wasn't about to surrender. If anything, she doubled down. She called a special emergency meeting, of the HOA board and publicly accused my dad of deliberate noncompliance and endangerment. A flyer was circulated, anonymous, of course, stating that our family's reckless behavior was putting the neighborhood at risk. It asked residents to consider if this is the kind of leadership we want in our community. Leadership. That's what this had become for her. A contest of authority. Dad saw the flyer and sighed. She's not just trying to silence me. She's trying to discredit me. So he showed up at the next HOA meeting. He didn't go to fight. He went to clarify. Patricia, ever the queen bee, stood behind the podium in the community center. She greeted him with a smile that could cut glass. Mr. Maddox, we were not expecting your attendance. I'm a homeowner, he said, holding up a copy of the HOA charter. Article 2, Section 4, any member in good standing may address the board at an open meeting. A few residents in the crowd nodded. Some even clapped. Dad approached the mic. No notes. No theatrics. Just facts. He began with a list of citations he'd received, how each one was based on non-binding HOA preferences, not enforceable law. Then he presented documentation, fire safety permits, municipal code references, and statements from the city attorney affirming his right to grill on private property. He finished with a simple question. What precedent are we setting when preference overrides law? When enforcement becomes personal? There was silence. Even Patricia didn't interrupt. Then someone in the back, an older woman with silver hair and a trembling voice, stood up. She fined me for having too many bird feeders. Said they attracted wildlife. A pause. I live alone. Watching those birds is the only peaceful part of my day. Another man followed. I was cited for having my garage door open too long. I was unloading groceries. Then more. Sidewalk chalk. Garden gnomes. Wind chimes. A wave of voices rose, one by one, breaking through the manufactured calm Patricia had built. Patricia's grip on the podium faltered. Dad didn't gloat. He simply stepped back and took a seat. The meeting ended in a hushed vote to suspend all grill-related citations pending legal review. Patricia was not pleased. Later that evening, as we walked back to our house, Dad's phone buzzed. It was the mayor. I only heard one side of the conversation, but I caught enough. Yes, sir. I appreciate the call. No, I haven't filed anything yet, but I've got documentation if it comes to that. Yes, public trust matters. Of course. When he hung up, I asked, what did the mayor want? Dad smiled faintly. He wanted to know what the hell was going on in Maple Glen. That night, our front yard became a kind of quiet symbol. No banners. No speeches. Just a modest grill, cool and covered, sitting peacefully where it had always been. Neighbors passed by and nodded. Some even stopped to chat. The silent approval was louder than any argument. But we both knew Patricia wouldn't stop. Not yet. Because this was never just about grilling. It was about control. And now she was losing it. The next morning, Dad received a formal letter from the HOA. It was hand-delivered. Inside was a notification. The board was moving to place a lien on our home for chronic noncompliance and refusal to pay assessed dues. Dad read it carefully. No emotion, just focus. Then he opened his laptop and began typing. What are you doing? I asked. Drafting a formal complaint, he said. To the state attorney general's office. Then the local media. And maybe a few fire safety organizations while I'm at it. I looked over his shoulder. The subject line was simple. Abuse of power under the guise of community governance. The war Patricia started was about to go public. And she had no idea how fast fire spreads once oxygen hits it. By the following week, the spark had become a wildfire. Dad's formal complaint spread faster than Patricia's flyers ever did. First, the city took interest, then the local news. Channel 7 aired a segment titled, HOA Crackdown or Abuse of Power. Grilling Grandpa Fights Back. They interviewed Dad in our backyard, right next to his stainless steel grill. He stood with his hands folded, steady and measured as ever. Safety is my job, he said plainly. Control isn't. The camera panned to the fire extinguisher at his feet, the fireproof mat, the regulation distance from our home. Then it cut to Patricia refusing to comment, slamming her front door shut. The community's tone shifted overnight. Neighbors who once avoided conflict now stood a little straighter. HOA meetings were suddenly packed. Homeowners demanded transparency, fair process, and a review of every citation issued in the past 12 months. Turned out there were over 40 violations issued by Patricia alone, nearly all of them subjective, with no clear legal standing. Garden decor. Minor paint shade discrepancies. Halloween decorations left up past season. Dad stayed calm through it all, but I could tell he was proud. Not because he'd won. Because the system was finally being seen for what it was. And Patricia? She was losing control fast. A week later, she tried to shift blame to the board, claiming they'd authorized every citation. But several board members came forward, admitting they'd just signed off without fully reading her notices. One even resigned, calling the HOA under Patricia a petty dictatorship wrapped in good intentions. Then came the final misstep. In a desperate attempt to reassert dominance, Patricia filed an injunction. She claimed Dad's grilling posed imminent fire danger and requested a temporary cease and desist. But the judge wasn't just any judge. He was a former firefighter, retired, decorated, and personally familiar with Dad's long-standing record. The hearing lasted less than 10 minutes. The judge read over the documents, glanced up at Patricia, then looked at Dad. "You're the fire marshal, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You're using approved equipment, with fire mitigation measures in place?" "Yes, sir." "And you've followed all municipal and state safety codes?" "Everyone." The judge set the paperwork down. Case dismissed. And I strongly recommend this HOA review its enforcement practices before someone files a real lawsuit. Patricia's face didn't fall, it cracked. For the first time, she didn't look smug or superior. She looked small. On the walkout, a reporter shoved a microphone in her face. "Do you regret targeting Mr. Maddox?" She muttered something about miscommunication and bolted. 2 days later, she resigned. She blamed stress and a desire to refocus on family, but everyone knew the truth. She'd picked the wrong fight with the wrong man. The board was restructured. New elections were held. The grill rule? Abolished. In its place, a simple guideline encouraging fire safety and courtesy. And Dad? He didn't gloat. He didn't host a victory barbecue or parade his badge. He just set up his grill one evening, lit the coals, and flipped a few ribs while Miles Davis played through an old speaker. I joined him with a lemonade. "Feels different now, huh?" He smiled, eyes still on the grill. "Feels quiet." A few neighbors stopped by. Some brought side dishes. Others just shook his hand. The woman with the bird feeders hugged him and said, "Thank you for standing up when the rest of us were scared." Dad simply nodded. Sometimes a spark's all it takes. I looked at the grill, at the man beside it. The same guy who'd faced roaring infernos, city council politics, and now a neighborhood tyrant with a clipboard. She tried to bury him in rules. But she didn't know he wrote the book on them. And when she called the cops, she didn't realize she was calling them on the man who trained half the department. That was her mistake. She thought fire was dangerous. She forgot it can also be cleansing. And sometimes, justice smells like mesquite and slow-cooked brisket.